Okay. Tonight, okay, we're gonna get started out of respect for everybody that's here. I know the weather might pull people up, but let's get started. I'm gonna call the East, you okay, Grace? I'm gonna call the East Lansing City Charter Review Committee to order. It's Thursday, February 20th, 2025. Grace, please call the roll.
I was ready and then I was not. Diane Gutierrez,
Present.
Pam Wheel,
Here.
Jonathan Foreman,
Here.
Jeffrey Hank,
Present.
Veronica Wilkerson Johnson,
Present.
Ruben Martinez, Jill Rode, here, Dale Crudoff, Lynn Richardson, here.
Okay, we'll move on to item 1.2, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve? I'll move the approval of the agenda as presented. Is there a second? It's been moved by Harris and supported by Wilkerson Johnson. Any changes or additions anybody have? Now I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. The agenda is approved. Moving on to 1.3, approval of the minutes. I want to thank you, Grace. The minutes were really good for your first time. Thank you very much. I'll move the minutes for the February 6, 2025. Be approved. Is there a second? Moved by Gutierrez, supported by Hank. Is there any changes that anyone else saw? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. The minutes are approved. So now we're to item 2.1, written communications. Packet was posted online, all the communications up to 5 o'clock yesterday. Else that came in today will be in the next meeting's agenda and packet. So moving on to item 2.2, communications from the audience. Anyone here that wishes to speak during this time? Not. Okay, move on to communication from committee members. I'll just start by saying I reached out to Kevin King. I'm waiting to hear back from him. You did get in the communications, the library, what he had said about what they could do. And I did look, and there are 15 places in the charter, and we added a 16th place. One is the table of contents. The other is in the code resolutions in chapter 6.5, which we did. And that says that the code, the resolutions, all resolutions and the charter will be available at the library. So I have to keep that in mind. And then 7.6, which we've been discussing, is the city attorney related to the formal opinions. And then we added 10.4 when we talked about the budget, that the budget would be available there a week before in our previous work. And then there's 12 spots in chapter 17. So when he gets back to me, I'll talk to him about if he wants to come to the April 3rd meeting, or and if he doesn't, if he wants to submit something in writing. There's a couple places that they do things differently there now at the library, so I'm sure either get back to us one way or the other. But that's all I have to say. Anyone else have anything?
Just going to add to that, I sent around a link to the charter and the library catalog, as well as a link to some of the other city documents that they have available and identified in the catalog.
Anybody else?
I could say something
Okay.
about chapter 8. We can talk about that.
Want to do it now?
No.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, now we're at our public hearing. This is our third public hearing that we sort of labeled as, that we've asked public if they wanted to come forward with any information that they wanted to share with us about how they see things in the charter, what we might consider. We specifically labeled it for 7 to, specifically labeled it for today to be from 7 to 14 chapters, but they could 1 to 14 is fine too, or anything after that. And I see we have one person in our audience. So nothing there?
I'm covering it for WKAR.
Okay, well, thanks. They sent out a media, a press release to the public about our public hearing too as well. And I know Mr. Meadows has talked about it in the past. He's not gonna be here tonight. He's out of town. So, since we have no one, I guess it must be doing okay if they've been watching us and there's nothing that they want to speak right now to, but maybe at the end we'll hear things. So we'll go on to old business, 4.1. Continued discussion on proposed changes to section 6.6. And we have the proposed attorney's version of resolution 2025-6. So let's open it up for discussion. Is this reflective of what we felt we were going to do?
I think that's the 7 words we agree on.
Okay. So about motion then, Dr. Martinez.
Move that we approve the changes on 6.6 as they have been submitted.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Martinez and supported by Foreman to approve resolution on 6.6 and the changes that are presented. Any discussion? None? Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. The agenda, 6.6 is approved. Now we move on to 4.2, which is section 7, chapter 7.2, related to the city manager. And I'll open that up for discussion. Just had one tiny little thing in the second to last line. I'm not sure if this is the right grammar. Is the supposed city manager during unavailability or the unavailability? I didn't know whether the had to be there or not, but I'm reading. I'll look to my attorney friends here. Keep the dot or not. Style. If it's okay to leave it as it is, we'll just leave it as it is. Okay.
However, yeah, however you want, I think either way.
It's the other way.
Leaving the in there. See how it's crossed out? Read it so that if it's how you would understand it. It's very helpful. Okay, we'll just leave it that way.
Is better. The is better.
Okay. How about everybody? Is there agreement on that or not? Disagreement on
I
maybe.
think
I think it reads easier with the in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think flow's better.
It's a simple thing, but Lynn has taught me the grammar thing. She catches everything.
Picking
That
nits.
I do. So okay, anything else on there? Thought that also was reflective of our discussion, which was a long discussion. I don't know.
I think also the second to last sentence doesn't have an object. So it should be with the approval of the council, the city manager shall designate a deputy city manager.
You're absolutely right.
someone has to do it.
So read it again, how it would be.
So
I did the wrong sentence.
with the approval of the council, the city manager shall designate a deputy city manager who shall.
Good catch.
City, okay.
Isn't it so what?
An object, right? Is that what the city manager is done down in the sentence? I think.
Okay.
Okay. It's been a while.
Subject.
Shall,
Subject. Yeah.
subject, yeah. Shall designate.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that change, is there a motion to approve 7.2? Okay, we have Dr. Martinez moving and Dr. Wilkerson Johnson seconding it, and any other discussion on it?
I think, I'm a little torn on this, but maybe voting no. I think everyone else is gonna vote yes, just, I don't like residency requirements, and I understand yeah, I think this is gonna get approved, but just sort of, I generally just don't think residency requirements should full opportunities. And I understand the sentiment of having the city manager here in the city, but we can't even mandate that the city manager lives in the city. So then, you know, we sort of accomplished the idea of someone would be close because they're within 25 miles, but someone's 24 miles away, you know, what's the difference? 26. You know, you have to draw the line somewhere, but I appreciate what everyone's trying to do, and I, you know, if you legally do it, I think object to it, requiring that someone live here, but I just think there's other ways to accomplish. I may be in a vote, I don't want to find that, I just principally just generally don't like this.
Well, so if you're concerned, which I hear you saying is your concern is that it may be exclusionary, because I'm presuming that what you're thinking is someone couldn't afford the relocation or the residency in East Lansing. Is that what your concern is?
No, but that's one, you know,
What
that
is
is
your
a
concern?
concern. I just generally am opposed to residency requirements which exclude any, because I think, you know, generally in the United States, you cannot discriminate on people based on residence.
Okay, so it's.
And there's times where there's privileges that are given, well, and just for something that we're trying to provide an opportunity to someone that lived in the city because they couldn't otherwise get that opportunity. I feel a little different about those. I just generally don't like residency requirements. They limit what people. They're not requiring the city manager to live here as it is, so I think that it's close, they're within 25 miles, but it's sort of arbitrary, but it's not, it could be close enough, but yeah, they're 27 miles, do I care if they're 24 or 27? Not really. So, I think I'm probably.
Ruben, surrounding counties.
Yeah, just kind of.
You said that there's other ways to accomplish this. I'm not sure what you mean by that.
I think, like, for example, the city could hire a city manager and offer to provide them housing. They wouldn't have to require that they're a resident. I'm just using Mr. Bellman as an example, like, he may want to keep his residency in Saginaw. Maybe for like his principal residence exemption for his house. So I just don't think it's necessary. I think we can, you know, if you want someone to be here, like, have a contract, someone apartment downtown, so you got a place to want. But if you happen to live 27 miles out in the country, here in, I don't know, Wausau or somewhere, like, put that. Doesn't really rank, so yeah. But I just don't like that.
Then I was just wondering, in real time, I know we have to set some kind of standard, but in real time, how enforceable is that if a person is 27.3 miles away, as opposed to 24? I doubt that we would really take that to major issue in real time. And we do have to have some kind of language.
No, that was my question. Where did the 25 miles come? Law said that's a big law. Oh, okay.
It can't be less than 25.
Okay. It'd be less than 20.
It's a weird number.
Yes.
I could speak to one of the reasons for the physical location in terms of event response. If you have your event response team that needs to be physically at your event response headquarters, and they need to be physically able to get to a disaster recovery response center. So that's a DR kind of federal standard of, you know, you want to make sure you can get your crew together and respond to the event and leadership. And then the origin of it in many ways is making sure that police were representing their own. Now that hasn't, you know, how that pans out to the isolated neighborhoods, but it was originally to say, hey, we want police in our town that live here and are policing their own community with that sort of sensitivity. And behind it. So, I mean, the history of it is, relatively novel.
I get that, and I've been told by, you know, one police officer, others Miss Lansing. I don't know. That's
We don't fire.
police. Can't.
Right, that's what I'm saying, but I mean, the origins of many of the original
And you
requirements.
know what I was told by these police officers, we don't, police officers, that's too expensive.
Right, that's why I was saying the 25 miles would allow them to live outside the expensive rate. Or you have to pay them not to live. That, see, I like it because it gives you affordable neighborhood for.
I just want to say briefly, I don't think that what we conceived of here is discriminatory. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
And I just wanted to add that this is a city manager form of governance, not like the mayor who is maybe working full-time and doing, has a job besides doing the duties of the mayor. Having that person be in charge, that's not really the person that's going to be in charge. It's going to be the person that the city manager designates. And we start getting down to not having the person that we put in place to be the city manager making decisions in the most crucial time and in a timely manner. So I'm sort of on that. Well, I am on that side that I'd like the person close.
Yeah, I don't want to open up the debate. If I voted no, I want people to understand why I voted no.
I think that's really good, and I think it's good for the public, if they're watching our meetings, for them to understand why it was put in here and why. Because it's on the agenda for tonight, but they might miss the discussion for you too. So always good to tell us your rationale for your vote. Some difference of opinion. So, anything else? Okay, now I need a motion.
If we have one.
Yes. All those in favor of resolution for chapter 7.2, signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign.
Close.
Okay, resolution passes. 62. 61, sorry, 61. Okay, now we're on to 4.3, section 7.6. So let's go back to our charter. We don't have anything right now that we're reacting to, except us continuing to talk and discussion about this item. And we're back to the formal, informal, and the privileged communication that we were trying to decide. And I don't know, Anne, if you have any specifics on what we would consider each one of those to be.
Well, so Tony and I did have a discussion, and I think this might help lend some light, at least as far as the formal. So the formal opinions, there was discussion with the attorneys here, and we're used to the attorney general formal opinions. And that is actually, and I actually just found the statute to be sure, it is in the law that it requires the attorney general to submit opinions when requested by the legislature. We do not have anything in the city ordinance or city charter that requires us to do that. So in the formal opinion sense, that is where this comes from, when we think of the attorney general. So I don't know, talking with Tony, he says that the only time he ever has had an opinion that has been released, and I know we discussed with you on council, the only time he's ever had an opinion that's been released is if there was an opinion that was requested of council. Council will have looked at it, and then they have by resolution requested that it be made public. He said in his time being here, there's been maybe one or two. So it's far and few between. They do exist, but I don't know if it would be enough to warrant having a collection of them. There might be in 20 years, there might be 3 opinions in there, So that's just to kind of shed some light as to how that is. The informal opinions are kind of the day-to-day. That's always going to be the presumption of the attorney-client privilege. And so as far as it being any sort of formal opinion, we don't have them by law, like how it is in state law. It's MCL 14.32 if anyone wants to look it up, the state law. So that was what he and I were discussing regarding that, as far as how we want to do the language, or do we want it in there at all? I don't know. I don't know that there's ever been a collection of formal opinions. So, I mean, I'm assuming we don't have one, right? We don't know where to even turn to.
No, there's a binder. I did get it from the clerk's office. It's
Okay.
ours.
Okay.
Binder.
It is a binder, yes.
Loose leaf binder.
A loose leaf binder. And when I went through it, 2005, 2006, and then I think there was nothing in 13, 14 and spotty in between, but it's really advisory opinions that this is how the special assessment role should be adopted, or an answer to a question that was raised by, they're all in there.
Okay. Are they phrased in a way, like, did they say in them like advisory? I
They
think
don't.
my concern and Tony's concern, and I'm sure the attorney's concern, I would think that it would be important to have a designation that this is not going to be the day-to-day advice that we're doing to the city. So if we called it, but I mean, I guess if we called it a formal opinion, but I think there's some confusion with that when we're talking about what, at least what attorneys know of is these formal opinions, these formal AG opinions. They're by statute. So that's, I don't know, I guess the discussion could be, it's your discussion, right? I don't want to tend it anyway, but do you want that still in there? What, do you think it's important to have access to that? Clearly, I think not everybody knew they existed, but there is a binder.
Could you solve this by just saying this doesn't apply to privileged opinions? It only applies to one. Okay, well, there's a debate about it.
So I guess I'm picturing a couple scenarios. First is, what was the intention when this was written?
Right.
What was their vision of, and maybe we can ask Redner about that, because I'm sure they went over this section in 92 or whatever when he was on it. But what was the intention? And if, for example, in a city council meeting, the city attorney is, an opinion is requested by a council member, just like the example of what happens to be in the current notebook, is that public request in a public meeting for an opinion of the city attorney sure feels like that might be a formal opinion, and certainly anyone in the meeting is going to go, what was that opinion? Does that fold into, if I was, watching it, I'd be like, oh, they're asking for a formal opinion, but, in a meeting, I'd kind of expect to be able to see, oh, what did the attorney supply in that requested opinion?
So like if it was requested, you're saying like in a public meeting, I
Yeah.
guess that would, and then it would be, well, most attorneys they won't give you anything off the cuff, right?
Of course not.
But yeah,
But it's like, to me, I would hear that as, I am asking publicly the city attorney to provide me with their opinion on this publicly discussed issue.
well, and
I've
if
never seen
anything, right, if anything as it relates to lawsuits or that's always in closed session.
Right.
So it wouldn't be a discussion that you would be
Right,
having,
it
or
would
should
be
be
in a public
having in a public,
Right.
televised meeting. So, yeah, I think it's more of I think the questions are, do you still want this to exist? And apparently there's a binder, so it's and I think maybe the background of it. And then what are we defining it as? Are we calling it a formal opinion? Are we calling it I thought about calling it a published opinion, or,
Right.
I don't want to sway you, that's your job. Yeah.
I'm not sure there's anything that requires a fix. Respectfully, you and Tony have a lot more experience in municipal law than I do. But, the same way that there's
You're an attorney though, I appreciate what you have to say, yeah.
the same way that there's statute that says the legislature can request this of the AG, we have a charter provision that says that council can give written opinion, or the city attorney shall give a written opinion to any official or department of the city when requested in writing by the council or city manager, and shall file a copy of the formal opinions
Okay.
with the city clerk. So that implies to me that when we're talking about the formal opinions, we're talking about opinions that are written in response to a written request by council or city manager, which I don't think if someone's asking off the cuff, hey, Tony, what do you think about this? Council, that's not asking for a formal opinion, that's asking for an opinion. So I tend to think that now that we know that this does exist, and maybe we don't have anything from the last few years, it sounds like, when we had pretty significant turnover, a fairly junior council, a new city manager, a new city attorney, maybe it's not surprising this hasn't been utilized over the last couple of years. But it seems now that we're kind of looking at it, we know what it is, and like council's asking at meetings, hey, what do you think of this? And Tony comes back in 2 weeks and says, this is what I think of this. That's not what this is referencing. It's just referencing when there's a formal written request for an opinion, and that just means council has to be, if they don't want the response to that being public, they have to be careful about.
They wouldn't
When
want
they're
to
requesting.
write the request.
Exactly.
For
That's kind of my thought.
Yeah, and that makes sense for my scenario too, where you would say, if you're a council person, you say, I'm going to write a formal request for this information from you.
As to how we're going to be adopting
Yeah.
X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
All right, Brian.
And I agree on formal opinion discussion. But I guess from a practical standpoint, and looking at the fact that when this was drafted, there wasn't as much kind of digitizing of materials. And going forward, things will probably be even more digital. And so I guess I'm wondering if we want to leave a listing form there, just for practicality purposes.
I think there's a few reasons why it should be maintained. I don't care if it's loosely for digital, but one, it's a record. Secondly, it's important to have transparency about how folks are being advised. And thirdly, given my background, I think it'd be good for research.
I would say, I don't know. Oh, sorry.
I know I've mentioned this before, but my biggest concern with changing it is the impression that we're trying to take stuff away. That would be
Like that
a
you
problem with that,
Get
because
it voted on.
any way we word it, and we start saying as legally required or any of that, it looks like we're stepping backwards, and we're not. So that's just my thought.
So in 97, this was on the ballot, and this 7.6 was there, and the statement of purpose was, this amendment will allow the city council to establish a legal department to assist in all its litigation before courts and tribunals, and will require a compilation of city attorney opinions be available to the public. That's what they wrote. And I would just say, I'm wondering if one of the opinions, formal opinions from 2012, 2013, I remember my church was going to expand or something like that. And because I was a member and the members contribute money, then I have a vested interest in it. And I said, can I be recused? And should I recuse myself? And they said, because the church kind of thing is a little different than what I was also with Blue Cross when the Blue Cross building was sold. And I was on the board. That was very different, but I was just a member of the church. And he came back and I remember he wrote something and gave it to me. So I don't know if that's in there, but that was something that he gave me so that I could say he looked at it and this is the advice he gave. It's interesting. I don't remember it because those years, but I was on council during those times.
Where's the binder?
Yeah.
Right, and they-
It's not in the library.
Yeah, it wasn't that much.
I mean, first.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, and to me, that's the type of things that should be publicly available. You know, how the city council should navigate a settlement agreement or something like that, the type of things that should remain privileged because it's, you know, it puts the city in a financial disadvantage for that to be public. Whether or not a council member can vote on a certain thing. Something that everyone should know the reasoning behind whether the answer is yes or no.
What's the rule on public?
So once a finding is made, once it's adjudicated, then that's public,
I mean, once the city enters into a settlement, then it
Right.
becomes public, but
unless it's got a non-disclose or.
I think we're, yeah.
So, right now on the website, we have, but it's taken me a while it seems like it's taken a while for it to get there. But now you do have all the resolutions back, to a certain point. The resolutions didn't used to be on there, it just used to be the minutes itself. So we could put the same time formal opinions. We could label it formal. If you like the formal, it's not, we're changing advisory just to put another ballot question on there. But we could have the formal opinions listed there in that same area. Would you think, or would you think it should be, I'm thinking later on for transparency? Where would be the best place for those so that we could get rid of the loose leaf form and have it electronically?
Well, I think it should go under the council's page of the website. I mean, if they're the ones requesting it and getting it.
Well, and Tony said too, what's there in the couple he did, whatever they were called, right, whatever he called, he said that they were included, they then became a part of the minutes. But the problem with that, I can see as a citizen, is that if you want a condensed version of it, you're not gonna go looking through every year's minutes, you know? I think for me, I mean, as an attorney, you know, I know it's important to know if I'm addressing, like, yes, is it a settlement concern or is it something for the public good? And I think, not that it's not gonna change how I rate my opinion, but it's, you know, you're careful as to how you word and what you disclose. So I think for me, as the attorney, as long as I know what is being requested and who will be viewing it, I can tailor it. You know, I'm still obviously legally obligated to give legal advice, but I'm gonna tailor it in a way that I'm gonna be aware of who the audience is. So I agree, I don't know. I don't wanna interject my opinions, but that's where I think, that's what I think.
So the consensus, there's never changed either, except for maybe we'll just
The digitized
format.
in electronic form. And should be available, are we gonna keep the review at the city hall and the city library? Copy of these, are we gonna delete that? And just put, delete the last
Well,
sentence and just.
that kind of goes to 8 again. So whether we decide if we want to put location everywhere we've got a dock, or if we want to refer to everyone to section 8 for the.
So when we get to 8, if we drop this last line and just put by year, in an electronic form, we would say all documents in an electronic form will be available on the website. You also can go, at the library, as he said, there's a QR code where it could take you to the city charter, the city, council minutes and all that. There'd be a computer available to access that. The city clerk is always thinking that's what they are thinking. If someone comes in and wants something, they send them to the computer to look it up, right? So we're consistent. And then when we get to that part, we talk about, right?
I'll have that question to Robert. Did the clerk say anything? Has anyone ever come to request those opinions or anything? Robert did.
Yeah,
Yeah, we did.
well, I we were talking about it. Well, and it was brought to my attention when I got first hired, where those opinions are. So I was asking Reed to have this. Sidetracked it, and I asked Amy again. Yeah, here's reminders. Up, I looked at it. Yeah, it's just kind of general advice in nature. It wasn't specific to any litigation. Be privileged. I just raised whether or not the change you're making is sufficient enough for a separate ballot issue when you're looking at the length of the ballots that you may have to do. So you can always, or do you do it as Pam said, chapter 8, where it says loose leaf? It will be electronic or
Well,
in the current media form.
I might suggest we come up with that generic wording of city hall, city library and online. And we do like we did the gender change, everywhere, a document location. This is now the language to identify that document location, because I love Jeff's email, which I know a lot of people haven't seen yet. But I think we should really separate out the required, clearly public documents from FOIA and all those things that go beyond the normal public documents as identified. But that's, I think referring, when you go to look at a document, you see that document, then if we footnoted it, then we're gonna have to say we're footnoting it all or sending people to section 8 for location. That's gonna have to be wording change everywhere.
Well, and these aren't being kept at the library. Librarians that don't have a copy of the charter at the library.
They do.
right? Oh, there's-
That's no, they don't just have a copy, they've got also, it's in the catalog.
Maybe I misread that. I thought-
No,
No, Kevin did say that, but I don't think Kevin fully asked his staff.
Yeah.
When I emailed him that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because he did say, we don't have anything on file here, but it is electronically available.
Yeah, it's in their catalog, lots of other interesting science history, and they're developing a science history here. They were really eager, yeah, he's really eager to digitize things.
Just one point, we have all these things at the library, and this requires a certain level of coordination. So we'll make sure, so it's electronically maintained.
But it's
It should
electronic.
process it.
They're gonna be, it'll be on Unicode or whatever it is. And then you'll be able to get to that Unicode in the library if you do not have a computer. And you will hopefully also be able to get some reference librarian assistance in finding what you're looking for. Fancy version of this, you know.
So if we were talking about leaving loosely form there and a copy of these opinions should be available, then you're suggesting in 8 that any reference in the charter to to journals or anything have now been transferred to electronically, and they'll be accessed available through the city clerk. And we'll get the wording and the library at that time.
My concern is, and actually just talking to the librarian too, he loves his hard copies. And we do want to make sure we have backup copies offline can't just be 100% digitized. If we do that, we're gonna have, it's even my, but yeah, so I'm concerned that if we don't plan for redundancy, plan for offline backups, plan for ransomware attack or catastrophic, tech failure, will be, if that's something you see. Right. So we can say that, but again, that doesn't mean I think we need loose leaf in there, but I just think that's how we want to think about it, 100% digital.
I thought the comment was where there was references like we are with gender, or just do one ballot issue saying where there's gender specific, we're changing it to gender neutral. And wherever it's referencing.
Location or format of document, these are the formats.
So that we can go in after one ballot issue, go in and change it
Yeah.
without doing each section. On the ballot. I believe so.
So I don't think we're specifying the clerk's office as one of the locations. And we can talk about that, but we were gonna say City Hall, library.
That's what city law is.
Oh, is that the clerk's office at City Hall? Okay, well, we
I
could
know they had-
laptop in the hall.
I'm assuming it's still.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, so then you have this loose leaf binder. If we put something in later on with, like the gender neutral thing, then are we guaranteeing that everything is digitalized?
Yeah, we'll have to scan at that point. We're moving in that direction. That's a
But
priority. in this
specifically
department.
this,
But specifically, any reference that requires us to have it loosely will become digital.
Okay.
And made available.
Is this it? Is this the only loose leaf reference we have?
No, we had the council minutes.
That's right.
And we changed that, but we changed it. Some other.
so we feel comfortable with that. Will we have to say that after this date of this charter revision, prior things would be digitalized so that we're,
Well, that's the question to Tony is there a requirement to put a ballot on that any references to loosely we're changing to electronic, or whatever.
Yeah, I think I'd say form, I'd say location and format. And then that would cover everything.
So kind of a general ballot issue that we kind of clean the whole charter up and not do individual.
If any reference to paper documents will be replaced.
so for right now, we're leaving that as is, because there's two things in there for sure that are gonna be a general resolution, gender neutral and the papers thing. Moving on to the rest of 7.6. Did anybody have any concerns with the other language that was in here?
Yeah, I talked to Mark about briefly, and I don't know what the answer to this is, but does the city attorney have to have, and then you might know the answer to this, or does the city attorney have to have specific power to prosecute? Because that's not listed as one of the powers of the city attorney in our charter. Obviously, we have a city attorney that does prosecute ordinance offense, ordinance violations, but is that a required charter provision? Or is that something that's granted elsewhere?
Well, I mean, obviously for us, we have the, and Mark has said he considers Gianmarco the city attorney, right? And then Easton is the city prosecutor. So I guess even in that, it's a bit of a bifurcation. I mean, with coming from being a county prosecutor, I could not prosecute city ordinances, So I mean, it doesn't say it specifically in there, but I guess the inverse would be, well, who else would do it? So do you want it in there? I think, but then that's the question of, does it become that if you're not the city attorney, can you prosecute, kind of like how Mr. Easton does? It doesn't say one way or another.
No, but that's, I think Mark indicated, I'm sorry, that Easterly is the special legal counsel. So that responsibility to prosecute wouldn't necessarily would have been assigned through, I think, his contract.
And I'm just,
I think you raised a good point. I don't know the answer to that question.
Does H address that? Subparagraph A.
I'm sorry, I might have been unclear with what my question here is. My question isn't like, does these, or whoever have the authority to prosecute? Does the city charter have to give the city attorney a city attorney the power to prosecute? Or is that granted by some other provision of law? Because we don't have an authority to prosecute, as far as I read these provisions to the city attorney, and I think that's an important question we need to get cleared up.
This is to the attorney prosecute.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
Any ordinance violation, the city attorney prosecute.
Also, that's like who signs the whatever, like,
And it also represents the city in court on criminal matters.
so it's been happening.
But certainly it's been happening for decades.
And I think that may be in state statute.
I would imagine so, but I just don't know the answer.
Okay. I feel like it needs to be.
Yeah,
What does B mean then?
Conduct, all cases.
Small courts in the world, but that's a little different, I think, from what Jonathan's talking about. I mean, that's giving the city authority to hire a city
Right.
attorney. The question that Jonathan's asking is, when that person is hired, what authority does the city then have to actually get that attorney to prosecute those cases for them? It's like another step.
So would it be appropriate to put that in B then as a second sentence?
I think in some respects, I think it's gone on the assumption and we're all comfortable. I don't think it's ever been challenged that, to my knowledge, that the prosecutor doesn't have authority to go ahead with this. It's just, I think it would be nice to know before we did anything more where that authority derives from, whether it's from a state statute or from, whether it's inherent within the Home Rule City Act.
Right.
I don't know that in the answer.
Doesn't H bring some of that?
That's what just the general remuneration laws council list specific duties.
I guess the reason I'm asking is because I know, some villages don't necessarily have an attorney, some smaller municipalities don't necessarily have an attorney to prosecute ordinance violations, everything just goes to the county prosecutor. So I don't know if there's a requirement, or if I imagine it's somewhere in the Home Rule Act. I would have to think it's somewhere in the Home Rule Act, but I just don't know if it's something that we need specifically listed, just to be sure. So I'm just
Yeah, sure.
Looking
I
down
have the
on that.
question down.
Well, in H, the second sentence, talks about putting the conversation provided at the discretion of council for litigation commenced of the act. Is that getting kind of it?
It just means they can get paid.
Doesn't have to be, but the next sentence says they don't have to get it.
But in discussing this, isn't that addressing that there is?
If I think that I'm sort of trying to give an example, and I'm not sure I've thought this through all the way, but if I hired you to do something, to mow Diane's grass for her, and I agreed to pay you to do that, that would be lovely between you and me, but Diane hasn't told me that that's okay with her. So that's the worry that we have, is where does that authority for me come from that would hire you to mow her grass? And it could be from the Home Rule City Act, it could be another state statute that gives that authority to the city. But so I think that, just saying you have an agreement to do that is not exactly answering the question. I don't know. And what I'm saying is it's never been challenged. Diane may let me do that for, 3 years. And then all of a sudden somebody said, she sells her house and I'm still hiring you to do it. And the next person says, wait a minute, I didn't hire you to do that. And that's where I think we just need to have those, there's a question as to whether we need to draw those lines.
So your scenario makes me think, who directs the prosecution? Does the city council have to request, I mean, does the lawyer just go, I'm prosecuting? Like, or is there
Yes.
some, yeah, right, so is there,
Actually, yes.
should there be some oversight of the prosecution
Well, it's
choices?
city council does oversee prosecutors, so I don't think the city attorney, so we don't have to be concerned about that. I think just at a mile high view, there has to be some authority for the city attorney to prosecute cases. And I don't see any authority for the city attorney to do that in the charter itself. So it could come from a state statute. I imagine it comes from a state statute, but it would just be good to be sure.
Who's gonna look it up?
The lawyer.
That's where we got it.
I mean, I'm trying to look, I'm not finding accounting stuff, but
Maybe
yeah.
the definition of city attorney.
Yeah.
I'm not an attorney, but to me litigation is not criminal prosecution. So I don't know if H really does apply.
I don't know.
I would ask about G, that, the last sentence that says, city may create a legal department to represent the city on litigation. That's also moving to this.
That's the city right there, the city attorney, I think in general.
Yeah, I think what G does is it allows the city to hire outside counsel for any big projects. And then I think the second sentence allows the city to make a city attorney's office as opposed to just a city attorney, which is what we have now. If the city wanted to do that, yeah, if the council wanted to.
Any big thing or specialized thing.
Right.
Would be G. Yeah.
What we need to add, we determined that we need this, would we need to add yet another clause here? Or
Under the fourth clause.
And one that's already here.
So we want to know, I mean, are we just want to make sure that we're covered by, that it's, I don't want to say it's presumed, we never really like to presume, right? That it's covered, or we're looking to make sure, do we want to add a line? Just to ensure that we know the city is within. But it's right, I mean, yours, but that they're within what they're permitted to do. So it's more of just
Well, I think if it's covered by
No,
other
we
statutes, we should worry.
But we have a fourth class city act.
that goes by, I'm pretty sure that goes by I think so, because that goes by population.
So it says section 20, the attorney, in addition to other duties prescribed in this act, shall be the legal advisor to the council. And all officers of the city shall act as the attorney and solicitor for the corporation in all legal proceedings in which the corporation is interested, and except as otherwise provided by law, shall prosecute violations of the ordinances of the city.
So that may be, yeah,
So that's,
that sounds like
State law.
That sounds like.
Do we have criminal violations of ordinance?
oh, yeah,
yeah, mostly.
only misdemeanors, yes.
So it's granted by.
It sounds like, it's where a fourth class city, which
MCL 87.2. I'll just give you that. You can-
I'm sorry, Robert, what was that?
87.20.
0.20.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we'll leave that for now unless we get an advisory back. So
Double check.
do that. That's okay with you, Jonathan?
no, that's
That
right.
addresses
Thank
your
you.
concern. Okay, so that closes up 7.6. Unless anybody had anything else in there, that was a good question. Okay. The next one is 7.12, and this is our ethics and nepotism one. We had someone come forward with some information, and we also had someone come back and say that information wasn't exactly correct, how that situation transpired. So the question is, do we want to change anything here or not? And I'm just going to start by saying, Jeff, could you just repeat everything you just said right now about the city manager and discriminating and not giving that opportunity to any of these people that are members of the family of the city council members? Because everything you said there seemed to apply to this volunteer person who wasn't getting paid, who's just giving advisory opinions and not making a decision that stands for the city. So that's
Well, I
sort of
think
my
it-
humorous thing.
Yeah, I think it's a little different. This is designed to prevent conflicts of interest versus job opportunity where residencies.
Well, it's also a job opportunity here versus,
No, it's not, it's a volunteer opportunity, but it's a, what may seem like an arbitrary rule about who can participate. I think that's what I is saying, like, he's saying that it feels arbitrary to say 25 miles, that you're restricting people's participation. And this is saying, if you're married, maybe,
there's a lot of people in here that can't be on a board or commission. And I'll give you some examples. We have a university community where we have people that these boards and commissions are entry-level places for them to get government experience. And they're encouraged in their classes to do that. And I can give you personal experience. My daughter was on the planning commission. She was, at the time, she was in the urban planning department. And then she went on to become a certified planner, and she was still on the planning commission working on the comprehensive plan. And I'm on council, and I disagreed with a lot of things that came out of the planning commission and voted a different way. But she was doing work, and that work was important to her career and also her student learning experience. And then I'll give you my husband, who also was on the Parks and Recreation Commission. They were doing a comprehensive plan. In the middle of that, I get elected to serve on council. And he was the chair at the time. Do you all of a sudden say, oh, now you can't do that? You're in the middle of working on something that really is just work for the city for free for all those people that are on those boards and commissions. And that's why it seems to me like you as a council member have to have lines of what you're serving the whole city, and you take these advisory votes from commissions and boards and plans and things, and you make a decision based on that for the betterment of the community, not because your spouse or your grandchild or your brother or sister, parents, stepchildren, grandchildren.
I think, Diane, you're hitting the nail on the head for me, and I really appreciate it. And I looked at a lot of different, I should send some around, some very nice wording about ethics in action in office. And it came down to the individual making unethical choices. And so if I am going to change my vote because of my spouse or pressure someone because of whatever, that's unethical. So it's not, it's not it's not the prescribed relationship. It's I'm acting unethically as an individual. Like if I'm letting my spouse change my mind, that's an unethical act if I'm, and particularly in the example we had where someone was wielding their power inappropriately, or that if it had was originally described, that's someone attempting to wield power unethically. And the context beyond the act of the unethical act, did they do it for money? Did they do it for love? That's not my business. It was an unethical act,
Yeah, I think the way we should try to kind of move away from our thinking about this as it relates to one specific thing that may or may not have happened. I think we need to think about what we think the best policy is. And to me, the best policy, I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, should the city allow people to take, people who are related to council members to take volunteer positions to help better the city? And I think to me, that's an obvious yes. If there's a highly engaged family, I think that's better for everyone involved, as opposed to drawing arbitrary lines, especially with what we're considering to be a domestic partnership or a domestic relationship here. It's drawing those arbitrary lines as to, you can be involved, you can't be involved. I'm also just going back to the initial thing. I'm uncomfortable with our committee getting involved in what seems to be another commission drama, for lack of a better term. I think as our committee, we should try to rise above that and not kind of get thrown into the mudslinging of who did this and who did that. I think we should just be thinking about what the best policy is. To me, I think it's clear that the best policy is that we should not be prohibiting people from taking volunteer positions based on who they're related to.
Thank you for your example. But this is about hiring.
Yeah.
It's not about volunteer.
That was the request.
That was the request that we were considering and that we had discussed last time we discussed this, is whether to change this to prevent
Volunteer.
relatives from being on appointments or commissions. But I think that's where the context of where the conversation started is.
And you brought up a really good point. You just threw domestic partners, and that is not in here at all. And as a person.
I think last time Jeff had pointed out that there's in the ethics, provision, there's a definition of domestic relationship, right?
I think Mark said that.
Oh, Mark had said that, okay. And I think that we talked about changing the definition of relative here, which I think is a wise thing to do to make it more all encompassing. I do think it's bad for someone to be profiting off of their, or a person's relative to be profiting off of their relationship to a council member. But when it comes to volunteering, I see it totally different.
You wanted to say something?
Yeah, just for the record, and I agree with adding the must and all of you discussing, but in fairness, when the complaint was brought before us, I think there was also an operational question about who can set or cancel or reschedule a meeting where the appointment might have been discussed, and that for convenience, maybe a person other than a designated staff person that should have been doing that actually did it based on their relationship. And I think that was the fine point. And whereas the charter won't address that
Operational.
but it's something operational, just for the record, I'm just stating that I had some sensitivity to that concern. Just going forward, the city might want to be respectful.
Robert's rules forward.
Chuck, sorry.
I did bring up the relative thing last time. So relative is defined in the ethics ordinance more exhaustive than what we have in the charter. So it includes like aunts and uncles, nephew, grandparents, grandchild. Step, says step children in the charter, yes, a bunch of step relationships. Half brothers, half sisters, so maybe I guess the ethics ordinance does govern. But if we want to clean this up, not touching the volunteer thing, but just making those harmonized or adding in other important relationships. I don't know why you came in and be Diana to start asking, explain this or whatever, but I mean, this is pretty common to have stuff like this to prevent the perception or the reality of bias, favoritism, abuse of power that come from. It's not arbitrary that people treat family members differently than they might treat other people.
Or even give them the job.
Yeah, getting and all sorts of stuff. So I mean, there's a valid public policy reason to have something like this, and perhaps even volunteers. I'm not advocating hardcore for that. I mean, I would entertain it. Discussed before, but that is an ethics ordinance.
But I
The
think,
language you're added.
I think we should add it because the ordinance can be changed. When we're doing this charter as it is today, I would want this charter to be reflective of what we have in our ordinance that we all understood was what relative meant versus someone defining a relative in a different way 2 years down the line and taking out some things. You get a different council, they pass a different ordinance, and we're seeing that in the world today.
We have an ethics ordinance.
Yes.
If we don't have ethics
He said that.
articulated in the charter,
We do.
but we do, isn't it all nepotism?
No, it's ethics.
And what it requires is that the council shall provide by ordinance for laws to secure ethics, which is what the ethics ordinance does. That's in the first sentence there.
One of the other things we talked about before going back to whatever misconduct in office provision that is, like the ethics ordinance doesn't discuss misconduct in office, might be another idea. Recommend that the council should update the ordinance and have definitions for that. Misconduct in office, set by word, charter could authorize it. It's the ordinance which defines it if there's things that are going to require the power to change what could not office or something.
We have to get that addressed. We talk about it at every meeting. Whatever we do, we have to get that addressed, that definition. Well, I would recommend that we do, the term relative is defined in the city's ethics ordinance.
And leave off the list.
And leave off the.
I think I understand the impulse. I think I disagree. I think that's, as Diane was saying, the ordinance can be changed. And so I think we solve the problem by saying, here's what a relative means in the charter itself, as opposed to referring back to an ordinance which can be changed by a council who decide that they actually do want to be able to hire their spouse. So that's my opinion.
So basically what you're saying is take what's in the ethics ordinance now. Then did you want to add
Make sure we have a match.
partners or whatever?
I think
Similar to what we did with protected classes.
Yeah, that's what we did, or one of our first ones we passed, we took what we had ordinance, so that protected and made sure that the current status. Is that okay?
Yeah, I just thought, I didn't think it'd go backwards.
Got redundant.
Yeah, it never occurred to me. It would always be forward.
Like a positive church.
Like, never occurred to me. Relative to
So I hate the ordinance, it's, but you put
the code number, because I'll just be sure to. put that down.
it's in Article 3,
Is it like something dash something?
administrative officer zoning, section 50. Division 1, section 2, on the stars. So I don't see, I'm in the meeting code, I can just put it on. The link was forwarded around by.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you could forward it. I mean, I could find it too. I just want to make sure I'm narrowing them. Do we still want it to say though, for purposes of this section, the term relative, and then we'll list out, we'll mirror what it says. in the ordinance. Okay.
We'll start with
It's A Gabbard. A-G-A. I don't know, you may not. And she on page.
Anything else on 7? One more item, chapter 8. Let's move on. And I'll just remind you today, again, as the agenda said, today was our public meeting up to chapters 14 and any changes from our meeting previously from chapter 8. Going forward, we're on the downside of our meeting. So at this point, just the update before we start our discussion here on transparency, which right now we don't have anything. We just talked about what we wanted there, remember, because we were going to create this transparency language, I think. We have 16 ballot initiatives up to this point. We've all agreed on.
Yeah, there's still open items. It's like that misconduct.
Well,
I
that's
think
the
that
one.
never got resolved.
Yeah, that one's out there. And I was looking for 6.5. I don't ever have that on my list that was adopted. It wasn't on the chart, and I didn't go through each of the minutes yet to make double check, but the last 2 minutes we had on that. So that's the only one that still had the red file. I also have on our whiteboard, sort of to hold back there, is the ranked choice voting charter amendment, where we're going to put that. There was a question about precincts and where they're located because of the churches being in a church is concerned. We have the documents to be available, and that's really what we're dealing with in chapter 8 right now. And we have a preamble to discuss. We have the latest ballot proposal, where we're putting that, and misconduct in office. Okay, that's still sitting out there. And we talked about last time ordinance or some plan that includes maintenance of projects and how the analysis of impact on projects is put out there before a vote is taken. And I think that's kind of what where we're all at right now. Everything else. Anybody have any difference to that? I'm trying to keep my running tally here. But look at, you just check on that one.
Yep.
But
You said that was 6.5.
so chapter 8 today, today. Jeff sent out some proposals. We can discuss that next time and put that on the agenda. If you want to do a little brief discussion or explanation and start the discussion here, and we can see where we go, but as far as language direction or just a general discussion, let me do that.
Okay, sure, thank you. Yeah, I worked on this with Pam and with Mark Grebner and myself and Grebner tonight, but a lot of it was his input, you know, he's widely recognized as sort of a statewide way expert, and his recommendations were incorporated based on what he said were main issues he's had. Municipal governments, particularly the city of Lansing, FOIL. So I'm hoping he'll come and sort of explain some of it, but tried to listen to what everyone said the last few meetings, and I remember there was some back and forth between Jonathan and Mark about a prior section 8 and having put the intent, the purpose in there. And I agree with Jonathan that it's sort of important to have a mission statement, so we try to sort of put that up front, but very clearly the city to be transparent with residents, already subject to FOIA, but we can provide people information faster than what FOIA allows, actually goal, it's accessible so that people don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops, try to do it without charge. And for city manager to appoint someone as the coordinator of all this, deputy city manager, which based on the last discussions, that could be like, I don't know, like 6 deputy city managers or something like that, or maybe, or I don't know, but it could be anybody, I guess, could be appointed for that, and that person would work with department heads so that when issues arise that they were trying to be dealt with, so fast to people, and if it's not, analyze that and improve upon it. If there's a litigation over it, learn the lessons and try to make it happen. We had some discussion about trying to do things differently if you're a resident and a taxpayer, to try to avoid that language. The idea that there are some people that could try to, for lack of a better term, like, just be a pain in the butt. Like the city clerk, there's people that go around and file a bunch of requests to just, get them off the wheels of government and harass them. They're just sitting there provocateurs. So we have obviously want to retain the ability to just file FOIA and charge costs where they're feasible. So if someone's trying to do something for like a commercial reason that is not a public interest, some of this stuff, the FOIA coordinator could, not have to act as expeditiously, but we're to do that. I think the last part of it is sort of, we've kind of gone over some, like with the budget and some of this financial transparency type stuff, but there have been issues in the past. Transparency, developments, tax financing, pilots, that sort of stuff, and maybe not analyzing as well as we could have, having information to analyze financial impacts from some of these deals. Some of these deals were promised more than they delivered. And, the city's maybe the biggest challenge is financial right now. Everything from pensions to income tax to water and light. So today there was another lawsuit. The city isn't going to get covered by its insurers. A lot of financial hits we're taking. So the idea is that if taxpayer resources are going to be used, our money is going to be used for some private purpose, for corporate development or whatever, that we make sure information is out there to the public, the council, to be able to analyze that with the goal that transparency will ensure that good projects happen and bad projects don't. That everything can be, when someone is showing on something that will help improve community input, people will come forward with good ideas or shoot down the bad ideas. And then to just make sure that when those sort of things do happen, that what's promised and what's forecast, we can kind of track to see if that's true. So, if something comes up and some developer is going to get millions of dollars of tax subsidies, that analysis should be known to the public. you can track whether that was true or whether there's an economic impact to that. That information is available. That is, about it. I'm sure Pam's got something to say here too, but, the other piece would just be, this is just a draft, some probably some language that can definitely be polished or improved. Try to use consistent terminology and find things that weren't defined. But one thing we did not put in there was just to reference all these other charter that we say are going to be available. But if we want to change all those things that we're talking about, we're just trying to do some language. One thing on the ballot that we change all those, or if we want to be duplicative and say, everything from the formal opinions, charters, and minutes that we reference, all those places are available at the library, city hall, et cetera. We want to warehouse all that in section 8. Maybe that makes sense too. And it's one place where we have a list of everything else in the charter that we say is available. So you wouldn't have to hop around. So that's one thing that could be added in there probably. Pam, did you have anything?
Yeah, I guess my take on it as it's been from the beginning, that to me, there's two separate data piles. There's the currently public data, which is the agendas, the minutes, the Public Meeting Act documents that are all available on the website right now. There is the documents that we are explicitly identifying in the charter as being available to the public. And those are all in this pile. And then there's everything else that is going to have to be gotten through a FOIA request. That kind of laying out that you understand what we're looking at right now. So we have all these things that are publicly available, that are in the Unicode, are available. And we're saying, here they are, they're at the library, they're at the City Hall clerk's office, they're online. And then there's this FOIA process. And I just like to see those two things separated. I like the FOIA information here, there's a lot of it, but that to me is, there's just our average working, we're just working, putting things up we know we're gonna put up. And then there's special requests. And there might even be ordinances around how isn't it up to city council to say they want this information? They want to, you know what I mean? I mean, that just seems like that too. I don't think we need to rush things. Isn't it up to the city council to say, can I get numbers on what these taxes, revenues projected to look like for 10 years? And if they're willing to vote on it without that information,
That's the problem that we're trying to address, that may not happen. You don't want to have to rely on
city council to ask for that
one
information.
Let's just take the Trump example. You didn't have the Constitution as the guardrail, then you can't count on a politician to necessarily do what the right wants to do. So, well, I'm just saying, just in the charter, it just doesn't matter who's in office, whatever we have these processes that are baked into the bureaucracy. The information coordinator, you're already required by state law to have a coordinator. So really just saying that FOIA coordinator is to work with departments to try to make sure all this information is out there and available. And part of the financial aspect of what, you may have remember when Trevor said this, said there, it's possible people are counsel at times to not create documents so that there's no public record to identify something. So that troubled me, that shows sort of a level of craftiness which is designed to evade disclosure. So well, yeah, well, you just just don't do that. You expect that, like you said, we hope that the council will be able to do that, but they don't. We're staff. We've talked about sometimes council members aren't, they don't know everything. They have other professions, or for sure city staff, attorneys. So it's just really just designed to have processes for it.
I'm just worried about the length of it, and maybe whether it's multiple things or
Can you walk us through the FOIA process?
I was just gonna say, I wonder if the FOIA was something that should have something in here to just explain to the public.
So requests come in electronically,
we've got a good web page.
just FOIA, and then it comes into the clerk's office. So they've been designated as the FOIA recipient, and then they're sent to departments that handle the item the person's looking for. So if it's an item that would hit multiple departments, we're all set the same request. That information is compiled, reviewed at times by city attorney for any exempt material, and then it's released. So you have 5 days under law, you can go up to a 10-day extension. And then there's always this debate on if I grant it in whole, I grant it in part, or I deny it in whole. And then when that material is provided after you grant it within that time frame, could take several weeks or months after, depending on the depth of it. So if somebody's looking for documents that go back 5 years. That's a pretty heavy lift. We'll give you what we have, and we'll keep searching and give you what we get each time, and we try to take a response.
Is there a charge?
Depending, if it's a pretty broad, if we have to do a deep search, yes, there's an estimated cost. So typically what happens, we ask Chris and IT to say, Google the computer system for this term. And if it comes up with 5,000 emails, we'll estimate how long it takes someone to look at X amount of emails, and that's the deposit is determined based on the lowest qualified person to provide that review, to go through all of those 5,000 emails and extract what's responsive to the request. Sometimes we'll kick a request back when it's too broad. They need to, it's too broad, we can't answer that. Sometimes it's pretty straightforward, like I just finished a FOIA today. And I went through my emails, sent them down one by one to Amy, and she uploads them to the Just FOIA, and the response is then released.
Those emails, searchable?
Yes,
Doesn't take that long.
no, because
Yes.
it depends, like the email, the FOIA was between January 28th and February 2nd, I'm looking for this subject matter. That's much easier than just a subject matter with no time frame. That's a much more deeper.
But it requires to be much more specific.
If they're much more specific, it's much easier to respond in a cheaper, quicker time frame. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry too. I just remember someone put a FOIA request and it was years of emails I had to go through and then.
Yeah.
And then they said, because they were asking in your private and personal and city email. And so I started searching and then I was doing the city first and then someone said, well, the city's going to do that for you. But I had spent hours and hours doing the search thing, but there were a lot of things related to that word. That word appeared anyways. So it can be different. I have something just, so we're going to discuss this next time. I don't know if anyone has comments to Jeff's right now, or if you want to wait till next time when you see it written, because I think that helps, because you have something very specific. I think it's important on your draft thing that somehow we label that it's a proposed draft from you, so it doesn't look like it's the committee's proposed draft. That's all.
It lists drafts, so I think that there's a draft listed in the header of both pages. That it's
Okay.
I have a quick question about public policy interest. How do we determine what constitutes it? Is there an absence? What constitutes an absence versus enough public interest to justify the position of charges?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
If there's some, if you have a real burning issue and it does have, public interest importance, but the public isn't aware of it, does that constitute absence of public interest or not? I'm just asking.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll think about that and come back next time. Probably come up with definition of that. I mean, part of that was, yeah, there are provocateurs again that go around and just try to request information, right? Save a bunch of people's time and it's not in the public. If you wanted to go request some documents, you had a whatever, something that you're concerned about as a resident here, that, to me, that's the public interest. So I think you read public interest pretty broadly. But that would be up to the information coordinator to look at it and say, hey, this is the person's invested with us here, this is, but, most requests are probably sincere.
One more question. Since we're not sure that the city manager is obligated to designate a deputy as city manager, can we just say something like, city manager will designate a coordinator, which is what you said, which was.
And also required by state for whatever oil law they have. Did you say that?
Right, I think by this city, the city manager is the FOIA coordinator. It's been delegated to the city clerk. And then the mayor is the person that receives appeals on anything that may be denied when a request, and then the mayor has to act on it. And the letter sent either uphold the denial to reverse it. It's the actual clerk. Well, it's Amy Gordon, who is deputy clerk. So yes, it's a designee of the clerk. So Marie passed it on to Amy and said, you take care of all for you. And I think they keep a tracking system on the computer, the website.
But I think if they got turned down, it would be you turning it down, right? It wouldn't be working.
If it got turned down, it'd be under advice of council.
Right, but you as the main point person.
No, I wouldn't. Sometimes departments will go to the attorney and say, is this something that's released? And if the attorney says no, then it would be referred to the clerk as it's being denied in part or denied in whole.
But you're the coordinator, so you're really where the buck stops.
It would just, the process works the way
And you wouldn't even see it?
I wouldn't see it.
You wouldn't know that the appeal was going to council, look at it before it goes to council?
So the appeal goes to the mayor. I get notified when an appeal comes in. The mayor ultimately is the one that chooses how to handle the appeal. But what I'm saying is when a FOIA comes in, if a department, say they're trying to get police information, the police chief or someone in the police department, and they would work with the city attorney and say, what's releasable here, what's not. If the request is not releasable, then it would be denied based on the advice of legal counsel.
So then when that person that's requesting information says, I want to appeal this, do they go back to Amy and say they want to appeal and it gets forwarded to the mayor?
Yeah, so it comes into, so on our letters that respond, there's a phrase that says, you may appeal this decision to the mayor, please notify the secretary of the council. So at that time it was Tammy, now it's Sherry Bent. That appeal would go to Sherry. Sherry would then send it to both Annie and to George. And then Annie would work with the mayor on how to proceed.
You have no awareness of this?
I-
Sitting on the council?
Okay, it never goes to council agenda. It's not voted by council, it's strictly the mayor's decision. I'm usually looped in at the time of the appeal comes in. Yeah, yes.
That would be important.
You're not involved in the.
Right.
I may not know the original denial because of the volumes of.
No, I was just as if, so, people can understand, the appellate process is done by the head of the governing body. So that's how they deem it to be the mayor. So it doesn't need approval by council or anything. And so that's kind of, different that's how our city runs it. So,
Right.
and so it's Mr. Brookover.
In Saginaw County, it would be put on the Board of Commissioners agenda. And then be a vote to uphold the denial that the chair would issue. And so, so each government is different on how they handle appeals.
So that's some transparency of play activity that we don't have.
Yes, our policy doesn't have that step.
Yes, I mean, this is just a big picture. What I want to say was this is just a draft to try to have a conversation along. Prior draft after section 8, that we're following state law. I will say this too, it's just a stupid thing, So if we're going to go to the voters and say, vote on some transparency. I want to go to them with, we're just going to follow state law. Like someone's going to say, you're not offering this. This industry should take you on pointless. So goal would be, how could we go to the community and say, we are earnestly trying to improve transparency. And that's the whole purpose. So, you know, throw darts at it, prove it, try to come up with better ideas. I just want to get some real content that might actually try to improve transparency based on what people who work on transparency issues say are issues.
I just want to thank Jeff and Pam and absent Mark for the work that they've done.
Thank you all.
Yeah, I want to thank you also for getting this out there. I haven't had time to fully digest it. I want 8.4, the presumption of having it without charge. I have some concerns about that. Because I guess it just raises some, there's questions that are necessarily baked into that, which is like, who makes the determination when it's not without charge? List certain circumstances where justify the imposition of charges, but I think one, access to public records information without charge encourages the type of provocateurs you're talking about as attempting to avoid, and especially when you consider that if there's a presumption of no charge, and then someone makes a decision to charge it, like be a coordinator or whoever, does that open up the litigation about whether or not there should be a charge on this FOIA request? And so that's just an initial concern that I have about that, and it's something we can discuss further. But it's just, I wanted to flag that as something that
Well,
raised some alarm bells for me up front.
that is why I'd really like to have the public documents over here. They're free, go at it. And we make sure we're moving as much into that pile as possible as new things come up and as we process things. And then the FOIA is charged because it's not public. And then maybe if it's FOIA requests come up, it becomes public. Oh, we're having repeated FOIA requests for this. Let's move that to the public pile. Now it's available.
Yeah, because most of the documents in the proposed 8.3 are already publicly available, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Right, that's.
And that,
Yeah.
right, I understand, but we're also, I think we're talking about in 8.3, unless I'm misreading everything again, I haven't had time to fully digest everything. 8.3 is also in reference to what some things that would be FOIA, right?
That's what it feels like to me, and I don't think it should. That's.
Understood, okay.
Right, that's.
So I think we agree
Blurring
on
the
that.
lines between when someone's having the FOIA, I want as much as possible in the free and accessible and just stop in the library and take a look at it versus stuff that may be used, maybe worth harassing with or whatever, or maybe even be involved in other litigation. It's the thing where you charge a little bit, people take it seriously or make an effort or don't bunch it.
Understood.
Is that what you're trying to do in 8.3?
Yes, that's,
Yeah, like,
my
I
vision
don't
is.
fully
once-
get this.
Yes, and once again, I'd like to see that up at the top, like transparency, declaration. Here is all of the stuff that's free and freely available and public documents. And then if it's not there, then we drop down into this FOIA actions, which the website's quite robust and relatively easy to request with the email. With the form on the website. And
So how does this differ from what's already available in our current process?
all the articulation around the FOIA details.
I don't see that that's any different than what we're doing now. I mean, if you want to lay out how to go ahead and pursue a FOIA request, that's one thing, but I'm not seeing how this is getting at anything different than what our procedures are already. And like Jonathan, I haven't had a chance to look at this and fully digest it, but I look at some of the language in here and it causes me a great amount of concern. It's like, in general, in 8.4, the public should be given access to public records and information without charge. Well, what are we talking about? Public records and information, if we're talking about the things we've defined elsewhere as public records, are we does that mean that we're making them, when you say access to, that's they go to the computers or so, but what happens then? Are we designating somebody? Are we saying that, oh, well, I want this provision of this code in the ordinance and therefore, city clerk, please go over here and provide me a photocopy of things. And they do that and they walk off with them. That causes an increased burden, I think, on the city clerk's office, and it could cause a substantial expense to the city in a city that's already, as we're all sitting here talking about, cash strapped may not be an accurate word, but it's, we certainly don't want to put any more financial burden on this city.
Well, but so,
Simply to have somebody photocopy something that they can read online or something.
well, but you're at the library, so it's online, so you could print things at the library too. So
But I-
that,
But I think there's some possible I don't want to say confusion, or I think unless you get specific, I don't want to have anybody sitting there having a squabble with the city clerk about what constitutes access and not, what, constitutes being accessibility. It's just, I have an envision of the gadfly out there that says, here, I have access to, give me the city charter. And by the way, I really want you to copy it. And the city clerk says, good grief, I've got 5 people online to register to vote now.
yeah, how does that work now? Because they do have access to it and they can go look at it.
Yeah,
And in terms of getting a hard copy, can they request the whatever, the city hall? Or can I come in and say, I want hard copies of the city council minutes for the last 5 years? I don't think.
Yeah, there would be a price to pay.
Yeah, because I'm asking for a hard copy. Yeah, that's,
Okay.
So to Lynn's example, the clerk would just say, wait live and we'll make a copy and here's your bill, like.
yeah.
But they can do that now.
But that's not what it says, because it says without charge.
Yeah, the way I read 8.4 is that FOIA should be free unless some other
Right.
provision, unless some other consideration
Yeah,
is
someone
met.
FOIA confused with.
Well, that's what I'm concerned about. I'm worried about conflating things.
So, yeah, there's
If that's not the intention, then I
definitely not the intention, so, yeah, there's probably ways to tighten that up.
And the non-resident comes in for a 5-page document and you charge them.
Yeah.
If you read for the way.
Yeah, but access and copy are two distinct things.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, I would email the clerk all the time, and I think I used to have a fairly good relationship, and I would get documents quick. All the time. Now, it could have been the opposite, I could have been treated, take our 5 days as a FOIA request. We'll take our 5 days, we're gonna take our 10-day extension, and then everything's a FOIA request unless you somehow make it known.
right. So this was you submitting a FOIA request, getting a quick
Me,
response.
just send an email saying, can I get a copy
So
of
you weren't
the qualified voter file?
Right, so you were submitting a FOIA request.
Even that is treated as a.
Everything's treated as a FOIA.
If you're requesting something, it's treated
You're
as safe.
the phone. You're not going through the form.
No,
It's not going through the process that we have officially. It is, this a request for information? That probably should just be a new code.
well, Municode just has, you love this Municode. Municode just has the code of ordinance.
No,
That's all.
no, I can have other things. We have
Yeah,
other.
everything else is like the city website, but going back to the point I was trying to make is that there's a lot of things that, someone can come in and request that are very easy to get to. So this is the intent. They're very easy to get to someone. They're in the public interest. Requesting for reasons, not someone who's gadfly, and the goal would be to get that person the information, charged. Now, if it becomes burdensome, or they are the gadfly, then, that coordinator is gonna have to make the decision to charge. And Johnson, well, hold on, to Jonathan's point, right now, there's already litigation that develops around whatever request, and whether something's exempt or whether it's too broad. I mean, this stuff happens all the time, so that it's almost, to me, it's not that different than what someone's already gonna have to deal with.
So why are we putting in something here? Why are we including all of it if it's something everybody already has to deal with?
Yeah, I don't like vagaries. So what I hear you saying is, are you asking because you don't want to have to figure out the date of it and go look at a packet? Or is this some information that is not included in general public needing information. All
Well, I'll use the example of the voter site. You're not gonna find the voter, or something, cost of the voter file, not gonna be in a meeting packet. Something the clerk has, it's who's on the vote, who's on the voter roll.
Okay, that's very specific,
Yeah, very
extra
specific.
data
Yeah,
that.
and they could, you're like, that's a FOIA request, let's take the time and the extension on that. Or they can just be like, you know what? It takes me 30 seconds to send you an email with document. Very much. Have a nice day. Thank you. But I mean, that's the goal. Is like if you're legitimately trying to just get information about how these things of government functions, you should get it. But remember the media here. The media requests something about some time, that's in the public interest. So it's, again, big picture intent is to provide transparency of what these Lansing governments doing. So
I still hypothetical actually.
yeah, one more thing, just final point. If there's concerns, which I agree that it could be people requesting stuff and it's a pain in the butt, then like, try to find a better way to do that. But I wouldn't say, okay, let's just do nothing because that could happen, because then we're not doing it. And if I'm trying, the goal is to try to increase transparency, so.
So under the language that you proposed here, I'm just trying to get a sense of where your head's at so we can, as we're moving forward.
8.1 through 8.4 was like 98% drafted by.
Right. Okay, understood.
All right, so it wasn't me trying to.
Understood.
Let's do this, because I
Yeah.
think we should do this.
So let's say,
Would he be commercial purposes?
so
Maybe, I don't know.
He's a political consultant. He wants to
So
qualify voters.
under the language we have here, an East Lansing resident who's a member of the media requests every email between city manager and any member of council. I think under the language here in 8.4, the default is that should be provided without charge. It seems like a really, really, really significant expense to the city. Especially because when you look at A through E, I get that there's carve outs there, but it said, what leads into the A through E is certain circumstances may combine to justify the imposition of charges, which tells me that at least two of those circumstances has to exist in order to justify charging.
That's a fair point. So,
So I think that's, I think that we have to,
I would
before we
change the word-
propose anything, before we address anything, we have to look really carefully at what it is we're looking at.
I would change the word combined, because I think you got a good point there. I would immediately go to E on that,
Yeah.
If you're the coordinator, you're gonna say, you want a bunch, like Robert said, there's 5,000 emails, like, you're gonna get a bill, but you can't expect not to.
Right, the other thing I'm concerned about, Jeff, is that I can see these requests being made where they're not public documents or anything. Just being made sequentially to staff members so that there's an abuse of staff time, or there's a use of staff time that looks like those staff members are being used to do the requester's research for the person who's doing the requesting. And I don't think it's a good use of city staff time or incumbent upon the city staff to be used to do research for an individual for whatever their purpose is. I mean, getting documents is one thing, but then you say, oh, and by the way, then I want this and I want this and I want this. It becomes more than just a record accessibility issue. It becomes you're now using them to do your research project for you. And if there are other ways to get the records, then I think it's reasonable for the city staff to just say, I'm sorry, go do your own homework kind of thing.
If it's public, if
If
it's
it's
in
a
an
public-
agenda, yes, that's what I'm saying
If
too.
it's on an agenda or something, if it's something, say it goes to the planning commission, there's a project or a plant or a developer has a project that's in front of the housing commission or in front of the planning commission. And there's some question about financial reports that you're concerned about or something. And, and not you per se, but the requester is interested in, then I think that it's incumbent upon that requester to go back through to the planning commission and see what the presentation is, and to go to their agenda and see what papers were submitted to them, And instead of going to the clerk and making sequential FOIA requests or something like that, I think that there has to be transparency is important to all of us, I think, sitting here at these tables. But I'm concerned that, that it can be, that there's a potential for abuse of the process here, that we need to be cautious about too,
Especially in the charter.
especially with insurance.
Robert, how much of an imposition is going on now by Gadfly's not Richard as well as other folks?
It's hard to quantify, but we do get various, so within the city managers round, we talk if we're all getting the same FOIA request. So we know it's hitting other
Multiple city
municipalities,
managers.
one, but we also get those commercial third parties that take our information about products we buy and try to resell that information to potential vendors. So we get lists, demands for all of our purchases for the.
Well, again, some of the FOIA request, your example, city could say, oh, you will find that information in the meeting packets of the planning commission. There you go.
I don't, does that fulfill the FOIA request to refer them to, to something?
So maybe it's not FOIA. That's what I'm saying, like, maybe that isn't FOIA-able. We have that information. That's kind of, this is where you might find that. Can I give you some advice on looking at the planning committee? Then it's resource librarian work. Then it's references, let me assist you in tracking that down.
Right, but I don't think it's the job of the city clerk's office or anybody else to do that tracking.
And you shouldn't be using FOIA for things that are
And you should
available.
be, but it doesn't mean that people
No.
don't.
But they can. So this is what I just want to say is that right now, you can do all that. Someone requests a document, it's public record, you said it's charged. So I totally hear what you guys are saying. This is a concern now that this could happen with certain people doing this. I was aware of that. And sometimes you get these requests, so we try to address that. So I hear the concern and probably come on to try to deal with that. But then to your point, someone can call right now and basically ask you if you're concerned about. It's just the city clerk or coordinator, whatever, to say, you sit it, charge the reasonable cost to do it. So we try to do that.
24.
We tried to do that there, but again, this was a trap. So I think there's a way to probably tighten it up and try to prevent that, because certainly the goal is not to have city staff get burdened with information requests, but Dr. Pittman's point, I think we may be worried about it a little more than we need to be, that it may happen from time to time, but not something like, the majority of people that would utilize access on this are going to be people just trying to get information.
I think I agree with that, but I think we open the city up to more of the types of things we're trying to avoid here by
Saying it's free.
certainly by saying it's free and saying we'll do your work for you. So I think that we need to be careful about even recommending something like that, because one, we also keep in mind that everything that we recommend here is going to council as well. So we have to balance that.
That's a good point. So I would say, let's recommend something to council that tries to fall forward on transparency and let them say, this is the problem with this. Because they don't have to take what we give them verbatim. They can take this document and say, we're going to change 10% of it. We're going to change 4 lines. That's what we're looking for. So I say we shoot for the ideal, being mindful of all the things to try to fix them ahead of time, but you don't have to send to council things we think are perfect. If we get something, we're like, we gave it a good try to get something as close as we could, but there's still some issues with it. But here, now we're going to dump it in your lap. We should do that. Let them decide whether to put it to voters. Let them take their, stab at crafting something better too. I think that's totally acceptable for us to do that.
My concern is if we err, and this does get voted and approved, it can't be fixed until the next time around, or there's another ballot thing to fix it. So we've got to make sure we've thought of everything, and there's not some consequences out there that we're just not anticipating. Because we're stuck with whatever's there.
Right.
It is now in a permanent document.
In terms of the voters and perception of transparency, a FOIA request does not come in. Like a FOIA request is for things that are being hidden. From a John Q. Public, well, I can see all, I can go to the city website, I can see every minute meeting, I can watch the videos of the meeting. Like, that's transparency from the perspective of the public and the voters. And so, as much as we can make sure that that's, what are people having to FOIA, and whether, if it's a request, because it's like
And
doing
that's
their
why-
sorting work.
Why I go back to the question about how is this different from what we're doing now? Because I think in the other changes we're making to this charter, we're doing exactly what you suggest, Pam, and that's shovel everything we can into the public domain. And that leaves only those things that we hope might be subject to a FOIA request. So in doing that, aren't we just duplicating what our processes are now? I mean, why do we need to have anything? I mean, I agree with the transparency policy and that, you know, it's terrific. We need to have free and immediate access to the public to all information in possession and under the control of the city to the maximum extent, you know, provided by law. And then we get to FOIA, and we've got a FOIA, you know, process that's provided by state law. So I wasn't trying to be flippant in saying to you, what does this do that we're not already doing? Because we're trying to make these two piles of data, as you suggest, Pam. So I'm just wondering what we change in enacting these things.
I can tell you one of my frustrations in talking with Mark about this is he had a complaint that the FOIA rules were being followed. Well, you can't, we get, that's the rules. And we have these, right, you know, if the law allows for an extension, we can give, like, how can you say we can't give an extension? Now, if you know, is there wording to stop someone from being persecuted? Does that extension go in front of the city council on a consent agenda so it's in the public record? Or, you know, like, but it's the law. So of course the city, to say hurry, what does that mean? Like, that's what I have a problem with. I'm like, well, what does that mean, hurry?
In that regard too, then, I don't know, because I did not, you know, I see that this is a draft, and my understanding is much of this was as a response to Mr. Grebner's draft of most of this. That where, as Jonathan indicated before when we were talking about the ethics and nepotism thing, we don't want to be responsive to one person's complaint about one issue and have us draft a policy that's responsive to that. Whatever if this is responding to some issue that Mr. Grebner had with an attempt to obtain information from the city, I think that we would be remiss in drafting a new portion of the city charter to be responsive to his issue with the city, rather than taking the long view or the overview of this is what we need, this is what the city needs to be doing in responding to these particular issues regarding public records requests versus FOIA requests.
But I just want to clarify something, that's what Lynn said is not exactly accurate here. So Grebner helped draft this. This wasn't just like his gripes about the city. This was also a lot of back and forth. This was looking, well, yeah, this was input from Pam. This was looking at what various different nonprofits that deal with transparency in government. Michigan is ranked as one of the transparent states. Suggestions that I pulled off the internet. So this wasn't one person's like nepotism thing, but a story from somebody. This was also my experience and other people I've asked, you know, what do you see as problems? Like, so it wasn't coming from one person, whoever asked for his assistance drafting it, because he not only drafts stuff, but also has had those experiences. And how do you try to articulate and tailor something to the most common problems that we talked about, acknowledged are there? And everyone's probably like, let's get home. We're gonna try to next time. I just want to. Very
Yeah,
quickly,
I just
my
didn't
plan.
know, and
Yes,
I
if-
thought, I thought you had said that 98% of this was drafted from Brenner. I didn't know if it
He drafted,
was.
well, he drafted the actual draft. That
Okay.
was based on, 2 months now of discussions and input. from
Okay,
people.
didn't know, but and
Yeah.
that's where I wanted
And
to,
get information from nonprofits that deal with transparency. and all that sort of
enough
stuff.
said, okay.
I'm just gonna have you say the last word and then this will be our conversation for next time.
If I could ask Robert and Ann a quick question, what's required to be publicly accessible by the city? Like what's legally, the charter, yes, city code, yes,
Public meetings, all the public
Right.
meeting act.
but agendas and everything else that the city puts on, is that required to be publicly? So what, could you just, so that we can have a better sense of going to our next meeting, what's required in the Open Meetings Act or whatever, the city is subject to be available online?
My understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is any action being considered before a body that is being called under Open Meetings Act should be listed on that agenda so the public is aware. I'm sorry.
And there's
So
entrance
the
to
public is
minutes.
aware of what they're discussing or acting.
Does it have to be online?
No.
He used the word online.
Yeah, no, it doesn't have to be online, it just needs to be posted.
So the city,
So we posted at Hannah
right,
on the window, we posted at City Hall.
and the city could post it at City Hall and say, we're done here, we fulfilled our duties, right?
If it's
So we're
accessible.
doing, the city does a lot, is it like?
They do way more than that.
Okay,
They put it online.
Right.
Yeah, we put it
A
online.
huge amount of data is available to the public.
it doesn't,
Now,
Posted
quiet,
it,
that's,
huh?
that's,
because I just,
As you walk in, you see the agenda, you post it at City Hall, you see that there.
yeah, I think
and
you
the
guys.
point, the reason I'm asking, sorry, Cam, is
Okay.
and that helps me form my thought, because I feel like it's being portrayed here that the city is doing enough to be, and of course, more could always be done. No, the process isn't perfect, but I think it's important to emphasize that the city is already going well beyond
No,
what it's required to do.
it's required to have those things publicly.
No, but by putting them online, by making them more easily accessible, the city is going beyond what's
Yeah,
required. I just wanted to emphasize that.
Boy, it's so simple. Just-
Understood. I absolutely understand.
So lawyers get excited about FOIA, like Mark Meadows, who I love, let's talk about FOIA. Nobody even considers just somebody looking for how tall their fence can be, right? So that's what most of it. And then there's the exciting lawyer part.
So, I have one question about this, and I think I've asked this before, but I don't remember the answer to this. But when I was getting ready for today, I noticed something that I didn't ask last time, and I did ask it. Chapter 8 says municipal court in our charter, chapter 9 says supervisors. When they did this in 97, they did not delete that chapter and renumber it. They left it there and they just have those words there. Is it to replace municipal court, takes away the history of this charter? So is it better that we talk about this as putting it before miscellaneous and having it a separate thing that came about, not to replace that? That would be a question I would want to be answered. Just so you have a historical document that's electronic here, because nobody's gonna have the paper one in.
Tony told us that.
He said we could, but
Should
they
have
didn't.
questioned it.
Yeah, I
They
really
didn't
like
do it
the
last
traction.
time. We had a lot of lawyers on that from before and they didn't do it. Okay, so on our schedule next time, we have a month,
I have a quick question. So as the list that you shared about the potentials of what could be in chapter 8 and all the great work that you've done to get a good part of that done with Park Revenue help. For the other portions, let's say someone came to me and they did about gender equity in employment leadership. And how could that be addressed in the charter? I don't know the answer to that, but would this also be an opportunity to determine if that is addressed elsewhere in the charter, or that's something that also could be in some way the accessibility of that discussed?
said the whole thing, gender equity, and what was the other?
Gender equity, just gender equity in employment and leadership.
So I would put that on the whiteboard, and when we get towards the end, that would be a topic that, do we want to talk more about this? Do we want to do a separate section? Where do we want to go? I also would say at the end, we will try to have Grace complete the chart by the time we have everything that we went through, what's on there. And then give us a chance at one of our meetings towards the end to say, okay, we went through the charter, think back. Has something come up that makes you think we should revisit this section or this section? Because by that time, we're also familiar with all the discussion, how one might relate to the other. And I think it's good that we have that time, just let's rethink and see before we send it off and lose our chance to have our input into something that could be a possibility. So I'll make time for that. I know that we have our schedule set up here. I would just like to say, I think this 8 is going to take some time. We have a month off, yay. Hope everyone has some good times. We have for next time, we have 3, 7, 6, 7, 12, and 8. And then we have to go back to 6.5 once we do 8 or whatever number it might be. And then we're supposed to do chapter 15, which is the contracts, franchises, and permits, and chapter 16. And just to be fair, I think we'll take up all our time up to 15. I think we'll move we can leave 16 on there, but we won't get to that, I'm pretty sure. And that'll be what we'll do with the library, because the library is just a 1-page thing, and that could be some catch up plus the other stuff. So there's room in the schedule to do that, but I think 15. And I'd like to say, I didn't print out a copy because I just handed, because I knew that some people were working today and we're going to have time to, as Jonathan said, really kind of delve into what you sent in that work there. I would just say we're going to finish up our other things, do 8, and then if we look at the next one, which is the contracts, the last part, if I remember correctly, when you're talking about what should be, you talked about projects and stuff and getting some information. Look at the contract part of the charter and see if maybe that might be a place versus in chapter, when we're talking about transparency, where you might put some things into that. And especially, I think it was in chapter 15. Yeah, plans and specifications 15.2. That might be some place where plans are put into their 15A, 15B, 15C on specific things.
Would it be worth asking the clerk or whoever the FOIA coordinator is to come when we talk about 8, so that they would get some information about some of this question people have and how long they ask it. For practical information, just like we have in the library. Person challenge. Sure.
I'm going to ask them to come. March 20th.
So you said we had a month off, I thought.
Well, between February 20th, March 20th.
The 30 days, okay.
So it just seems that since we're going to be on that, we might have both of them. You're going to follow up with the city clerk.
Yeah, I'll invite you.
Shot.
What's it?
The municipal utilities. I think that one's gonna be long.
I was about to send everybody an article about geothermal plants they're building, how we can save money, and the city should study getting us off the BWL. Let's put that on the whiteboard. I'm gonna send it out.
Great idea. Let's talk about that.
It's probably cost, $200 million to build it, but it might be worth it.
Okay, so if that's all right, we're going to end early tonight. So
I just had one other
Yes.
thing. Just as a reminder, if you want something on the agenda, the Thursday 5 p.m. prior to your meeting is our deadline. Because then we finalize the agenda and publish it by noon that Friday. We don't like to make changes.
However, we
When it's
can,
published.
when you're asked, when we said at the beginning of the meeting, the approval of the agenda is an opportunity.
You could, but the material may
Yeah, it's
not
not
be
cool.
readily available to all of your
if somebody
committee members.
somebody who's interested, it would be fair to make decisions that night without going according to what we have published.
So that's 1 week, then. Thursday before that.
Yes.
So,
Just think will be on the agenda.
Right.
With the attachment. I cannot read my phone.
Yeah, that came later. But that-
No, I know, I
Yeah,
just,
that it was not, you gotta have it ahead of time, with enough time to digest it. Robert, I totally agree.
okay, so with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Let's move by Wilkerson Johnson and seconded by Foreman. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you all.